I am Renee Steinhagen. As I said, I'm the Executive Director of New Jersey Appleseed Public Interest Law Center. We are the generators of a project called Plan Newark, which have sponsored this exhibit. I want to thank the sponsors of this exhibit, Newark Landmarks, the Hanani Group, LLC, and I have special thanks to L&M, which are allowing us, who are hosting us in this building. As for using this space, both for the exhibit that has been here the entire summer until the end of next week, and for hosting this panel and next week's panel, which will focus on the role of preservation in Newark's future. I want to thank each of the panelists for agreeing to participate. I'm going to introduce them here briefly at this moment. We have Alex Shalom at the end of the table, who is the supervising attorney for the ACLU, New Jersey. We have Andrea McChristian. By the way, their bios are on the pages here, who is the Law and Policy Director at the Institute for Social Justice in New Jersey. Ronald Pierce, who's also at the Institute for Social Justice, and he's the Democracy and Justice Fellow. And Zalman Newfield, who is an Associate Professor of Sociology at Manhattan Borough Community College, which is part of the CUNY system in New York. Our intent here is to engage each of you in a discussion about current criminal justice reform initiatives and to understand the social and political values they reflect, especially with respect to the goals of incarceration or imprisonment. Like the system of criminal justice that has created prisons, prisons demonstrate what we would like to think and project what our values and ourselves are as a society. The Essex County Jail closed in 1971, primarily due to gross overcrowding, and it was built in 1937. Historically, 1937 was 60 years after the American Revolution, was only 1 year after Newark was incorporated as a city in 1836, and it was 24 years before the Civil War. It was at the height of the Jacksonian period when reformers hoped that the way they developed institutions, whether prisons, asylums, and the almshouse, the latter two were designed for the mentally ill and the poor, would give the inmates tools to change. Rehabilitation as a goal of incarceration became the rule of the day and was a clear influence on the design of the Essex County Jail. The jail and the old Essex County Courthouse, which were built around the same time, were designed by the architect and social reformer John Haviland. And he was an English-born immigrant. He was an established prison architect when he built the Newark Jail. And he was most notable for the East State Penitentiary in Pennsylvania, which I understand is currently a museum. And he was responsible for the tombs in New York City and other prison designs that emphasized, according to historic accounts, prison reform over brutal punishment. Well, what did that mean, prison reform? Incarceration as a form of criminal punishment is a relatively recent episode in Anglo-American jurisprudence. Before the 19th century, sentences of penal confinement were rare. Rather, early American prisons essentially imitated the model of the 1500s English almshouse or workhouse. That is, although jails were a key feature of colonial North American communities, they generally did not serve as places of incarceration, as a form of punishment. Instead, their main aim was allegedly non-punitive detention facilities for pre-trial and pre-sentencing criminal defendants, as well as imprisoned debtors. The most common penal sanction of the day were fines, whipping, community-oriented punishments like the stocks, banishment, and more serious crimes were met by death in the gallows. Notwithstanding the conditions in these jails, such as the predecessor of the Essex County Jail, which was located in basement facilities at the corner of Broad and Walnut Street, at the present site of the Grace Episcopal Church, were horrible, unsafe, and inhumane. Many prisons in colonial America were no more than a cage or a closet, expressing utmost disrespect and contempt for the inmates. Starting in the 1820s, picking up on reform efforts that were going on elsewhere in the world, primarily in England, a new institution, the penitentiary, gradually became the focus point of criminal justice in the United States. Among the traditional goals of incarceration that we hear about, incapacitation, deterrence, rehabilitation, and punishment, rehabilitation became the primary aim of incarceration. Views of atonement and penitence prevailed, resulting in the Haviland design of individual cells where segregation of prisoners in their own cells became a mechanism to facilitate a prisoner's change in behavior. Within this reform movement, there were two competing models emerged. The Pennsylvania separation system, identified with Haviland's Eastern State Penitentiary, and a labor rehabilitation model emerging from the Auburn experience in New York State Prison. Auburn became the first prison to implement the rehabilitative idea, where the function of the prison was to isolate, teach obedience, and use labor for the means to change an inmate's behavior. The Pennsylvania model functioned almost the same as the Auburn model, but it eliminated totally human contact with others, meaning that inmates not only were incarcerated in cells alone, they ate alone, did not leave their cell, and were only allowed approved visitors. The latter proved too costly and detrimental to inmate mental health, and the Auburn model thus prevailed with its different and perhaps more humane and comprehensive view of rehabilitation, not just strict atonement achieved in isolation. It is not clear if the Essex County Jail practiced the Pennsylvania model. Recounts I have read don't even make mention of this issue. However, a review of the structure indicates that the cells were quite small and very close together, and clearly people could talk to one another. Also, evidence later in the history of the prison indicates that work activity was occurring at the prison. What is clear is that the design of our prisons and the spaces within them reflect different goals of incarceration. This fact may be relevant to ideas as to whether we should preserve or repurpose this facility, which since a fire in 2003 has devastated the women's wing that was built in 1895, and definitely the prison sits in what I would call rubble. The property is currently unsecured, open to trespassers and urban explorers, and as the photos included in this exhibit by Maureen Beitler indicate, it is frequently featured in what people call room photography. The site must be addressed. But the seminal question whether to preserve or repurpose will not be dealt with tonight. Rather, each of the panelists here who are currently engaged in criminal justice reform efforts or as Zalman participated in providing educational services to inmates will discuss their efforts and how they reflect current views of what should be the rating goal of incarceration today. With these thoughts, I turn the discussion over to the panelists and encourage all of you to ask questions after each panelist has presented their thoughts. And our aim here is to inform and to encourage anyone in this audience who wants to get involved in criminal justice efforts to do so. So with that, I'll turn it over to Andrea.
Good evening, everyone. First, I'd like to thank Renee and New Jersey Appleseed Public Interest Law Center for the invitation to speak with you all today about incarceration, rethinking, and reform. Through my work at the New Jersey Institute for Social Justice, I served as the primary author of 3 reports on New Jersey's youth justice system, including one available at the front table here, Bring Our Children Home, a prison-to-school pipeline for New Jersey's youth. The transformation of the Essex County Jail that brings us here tonight speaks to how we all can work to transform and reimagine what justice could look like in the Garden State and beyond. But to begin and set the frame for my remarks, I'd like to tell you all a story, the story of the Bordentown School. Opened in 1886 by the formerly enslaved Reverend Walter Rice, The Bordentown School was an elite, co-ed, state-run boarding school for New Jersey's Black students. Called the Tuskegee of the North, after Booker T. Washington's Tuskegee Institute, the Bordentown School sat on 400 acres in Bordentown, New Jersey, and developed a reputation for exemplary vocational training and college preparedness. Visited by such luminaries as Mary McLeod Bethune, W.E.B. Du Bois, Albert Einstein, and Eleanor Roosevelt, Bordentown's graduates went on to become professors in law, went on to become doctors, teachers, and others in the skilled trades. After Brown versus Board of Education and New Jersey law ended public school segregation, the Bordentown School attempted to integrate, but only attracted 2 white students, leading to its eventual closure in 1955. So I ask you all, what do you think now sits on the land that was once home to New Jersey's Tuskegee of the North that educated so many generations of Black youth? Hayes, New Jersey's girls' youth prison. Bordentown has literally become the school-to-prison pipeline realized here in New Jersey. Now, I wanted to open with the story of Bordentown because it speaks to the investment that the state of New Jersey is willing to make in its kids, particularly its Black kids. Rather than invest in resources that will uplift them, such as the Bordentown School, we are investing more and more money into failed youth prisons that incarcerate rather than educate. But starting on a positive note, New Jersey has had great success in reducing its youth prison population. Between 1997 and 2010, the total population of confined youth in our state's juvenile facilities was cut by half. But while the overall number of incarcerated young people has sharply decreased, racial disparities in New Jersey's youth justice system have exploded, illuminating a sobering picture of the many reasons why our current system of youth incarceration must be put to an end. First, New Jersey has the worst racial disparities in terms of how many Black kids it locks up versus how many white kids in the nation. Let me say that again. Right here in New Jersey, we have the worst Black to white youth incarceration disparity rate in the country. A Black kid in New Jersey is 30 times more likely to be locked up than a white kid, even though research shows that Black and white youth commit most offenses at similar rates, and any differences in offenses don't account for the drastic differences we see in what kids get incarcerated. But what does this look like in reality? As of May 1st of this year, there are 158 kids incarcerated in New Jersey's 3 youth prisons. Out of these 158 kids, 113 are Black, 35 are Latino, and only 8 are white. That means out of the whole state of New Jersey, we are only locking up 8 white kids as compared to 113 Black ones. Second, we are incarcerating our small number of youth in largely empty youth prisons. Jamesburg, the largest youth prison for boys in the state, which was built for 330, incarcerates only 88. And Hayes, the girls' youth prison, which has a capacity of 48 girls, incarcerates 7. But this excessive amount of money we're spending to lock up our kids isn't matching up with these low numbers. In 2019, the state estimates it will spend over $289,000 to incarcerate each kid in a youth prison for the year. Imagine the good we could do in a young child's life, or in a child's life, for $289,000 a year. And this costly and racialized system is not increasing public safety. Of the 450 young people released from state youth facilities in 2014, almost 80% had a new court filing or arrest, almost 60% had a new adjudication or conviction, and almost 1/4 ended up right back within these facilities within 3 years. Now, recognizing the urgent need for transformative youth justice reform, the Institute, as part of a larger coalition of advocates, parents, formerly incarcerated youth, and faith leaders, launched its 150 Years is Enough campaign on June 28, 2017. On that day, the 150th anniversary of Jamesburg's opening, we joined with hundreds of others in front of that youth prison to announce the creation of a campaign to close New Jersey's failed youth prisons and to invest meaningfully in community-based programs and alternatives to incarceration. And as an aside, Jamesburg also carries additional significance to today's program. As mentioned in the exhibit, children as young as 9 years old were held in the Essex County Jail for misdemeanors until Jamesburg's opening in 1867. On January 8, 2018, in direct response to the advocacy of the 150 Years is Enough campaign, former Governor Chris Christie announced the closure of Jamesburg and Hayes and the development of 2 smaller youth rehabilitation centers in the central and southern regions of the state. While we lauded the closure announcement, when it comes to the 2 new youth rehabilitation centers, especially given the state's plan to spend over $160 million, or around $300 million after interest, to construct 2 new facilities on large tracts of land far away from families in Ewing and Winslow Township, our campaign has consistently made one thing clear: New Jersey does not need any more youth prison beds. Our state already has 11 non-secure youth residential community homes, including one right here in Newark on Central Avenue, and these facilities are at less than half capacity. Indeed, based on the average daily population numbers available in the most recent budget, and because our state's youth prisons are also at half capacity, all but 2 of the young people estimated to be incarcerated at youth prison in 2020 could be moved to an empty bed within a residential community home. We simply don't need any more youth prison beds. While there are currently facility restrictions for certain young people, such as those who have been waived, such restrictions make it even more important that New Jersey takes the time necessary to meaningfully review its own facilities through a transparent and community-involved process before it begins building even more youth prisons with empty beds. Thus, rather than continuing to invest funds into the dying system of youth incarceration, we are advocating for New Jersey to instead take the time needed to investigate the question of what our system of youth justice can look like beyond youth prisons. To be clear, we recognize that some young people may need to be out of home for public safety reasons, but it doesn't need to be in the usual traditional model of large congregate care youth prisons removed from families and communities. Rather, these facilities should be small, home-like, community-based, and imbued with family involvement, intensive treatment, individualized services to achieve meaningful and lasting rehabilitation and reintegration upon release. Now, imagining a world with no youth prisons is no easy feat. Indeed, people have called us naive, idealistic, and sometimes much worse. But I sit before you today saying that we would rather be called idealistic than resign ourselves to the fact that, due to a lack of imagination or a need to simply treat youth justice transformation as a construction project, we didn't do all we could do to make a better world for New Jersey's locked up youth. Indeed, as both a Black woman and a former teacher, youth justice transformation is personal for me. Thus, the 150 Years is Enough campaign seeks to imagine a state where, instead of funneling continued funding into youth prisons, we look to meaningfully invest in a community-based system of care that supports and develops our young people before they ever become system involved. Which leads to the next question. What does such a transformative community-based system of care for New Jersey's youth look like? Well, we have the answer, as we outlined in our vision document, also available at the front table, Investing in Kids Not Prisons, the Urgency of Transformative Youth Justice Reform in New Jersey. It looks like this. 1, developing a comprehensive action plan for addressing the state's harmful youth incarceration racial disparities. 2, creating a fully funded youth justice transformation lockbox to finance effective community-based youth programs. 3, developing a closure plan for all of New Jersey's youth prisons, including JMSF, its most secure youth prison for boys. 4, conducting a comprehensive evaluation of the state's current youth facilities to determine whether any can be closed or used to house young people transitioning from or would otherwise be sent to a youth prison. And 5, only as a last resort, after comprehensive research and review that incorporates community input, including on locations, repurposing or renovating existing structures to develop youth rehabilitation centers, if needed, that follow best practices and are filled with public workers located in communities most impacted by youth incarceration. So with all of that said, what can each of you in this room do to help make this vision of youth justice a reality? First, you can tweet, call, and email Governor Murphy's office to convene the 3 public hearings required of the Governor's Task Force for the Continued Transformation of Youth Justice in New Jersey. On October 26, 2018, in direct response to the advocacy of the 150 Years is Enough campaign, Governor Murphy issued Executive Order Number 42, creating a Youth Justice Task Force to oversee closure of the youth prisons, the creation of a lockbox fund to finance effective youth programs, and assessment of New Jersey's currently existing 11 residential community homes. The Institute serves on the task force, along with Reverend Warrior of Salvation Social Justice and my co-panelist, Shalom. Importantly, the executive order mandates that the task force shall hold 3 public hearings in the north, central, and southern regions of the state in order to gather vital community feedback on what is needed to meaningfully transform our youth justice system, from community investment all the way to out-of-home placements. Yet to date, not a single public hearing has been scheduled or held. To ensure full transparency in the process and to guarantee that community voice and input is at the forefront of reform, please tweet Governor Murphy at @GovMurphy, or email and call his office to tell him to schedule and hold these task force public hearings as soon as possible. Second, please call on your legislators to support and push to a hearing the New Jersey Youth Justice Transformation Act, bill numbers S3701 and A5365. Introduced on May 16th of this year, the Youth Justice Transformation Act contains many of the important youth justice reforms outlined in the campaign vision document, including setting closure deadlines for all 3 of New Jersey's youth prisons, requiring New Jersey to develop a comprehensive closure transition plan for both youth and workers, looking at all of New Jersey's 11 non-secure youth facilities to see how they can be better utilized, requiring community input before any new youth rehabilitation centers are even contemplated, creating a $100 million youth justice transformation fund to fund effective community-based youth programs. 6, require a racial and ethnic disparity study. And last, placing youth incarceration is the last disposition option courts can consider, not the default. The bill is currently in the Law and Public Safety Committee in both houses. We need your help to move it to a hearing so that it can be voted on and signed by the governor in short order to ensure that youth justice transformation is comprehensive and looks at the entire continuum of care for our kids, and is not merely treat this as a construction project. If you have a moment, either now or in the next few days, I'd ask you all to look at your phones and put in buildupkidsnj.org. I'll say that again since I saw no one took out their phones. buildupkidsnj.org. This will allow you to tweet, email, and call your legislators to support the New Jersey Youth Justice Transformation Act and to move it through the legislature in short order and to urge Governor Murphy to sign the bill once it gets to his desk. Please share and tweet this link so the state can hear that we are committed to our young people's future in New Jersey and recognize that there are no throwaway kids in the Garden State. I want to conclude my remarks by bringing them back to the boarding town school. Last year, I had the opportunity to walk around the school with a group of alumni, mostly in their 70s and 80s. One of those alums, Dr. Arthur Sines, graduated from the school and went on to become a leading architect and dean of an architectural school. As we walked along the old campus grounds, where many of the boarding town school's original buildings still stand, I saw his eyes almost well up with tears as he expressed his frustration at what his beloved school had now become, home to the girls' youth prison and across the street from the state's most secure youth prison for boys. As he stood in silence, I couldn't even begin to imagine the many thoughts running through his head, seeing this literal representation of the school-to-prison pipeline here in New Jersey. So when you think of youth justice transformation here in New Jersey, I want you to think of Dr. Sines and the way that education set him on a path to excellence in life. And then I want you to think of all the Dr. Sines currently locked up behind New Jersey's prison walls. I want you to imagine their potential. I want you to imagine their possibility. Indeed, imagine if that $289,000 a year currently spent on incarceration was instead used to rebuild a modern and integrated boarding town school. We could create a prison-to-school pipeline for New Jersey's youth that would have reverberations throughout the state and country. But we have to take action now to make these types of investments a reality for all of our kids. This very notion speaks to the power of transformation, the power of creating investment in a place, in a structure where there was previously disinvestment, the idea that brings us all here today. Just as we consider if and how the Essex County Jail should be transformed, imagine if that same promise and meaningful investment was granted to all of our state's kids, regardless of race, color, and creed. That's the true transformation our state so desperately needs. Thank you so much.
Good evening, my name is Ronald Pierce. I'm the Democracy and Justice Fellow from New Jersey Institute for Social Justice. I'm here today to talk to you about voting rights and these voting rights that are being denied to people in prison on parole and probation. Now, I say voting rights and not just voting restoration because it is my belief that no one ever had a right to take the fundamental right that protects all other rights from any other human being. So I don't just use restoration, I use voting rights. Now, in New Jersey, we at one time had the most expansive law of any of the 13 colonies, or 13 states. In our original Constitution, anybody with property, and that included free black man, free white man, and if any white woman had property, they can vote. And then in 1807, that was curtailed. But in 1844, which is the campaign name, the campaign turned to voting rights only for white men. And that was in our Constitution in 1844. Now, picture that, white men only can vote. That meant no African American men, no Chinese men, no women at all, just men. And what this brings me to is the idea that we have a fundamental right to vote, although some people say we have the right to vote is a privilege. And I want to change that word, because the right to vote in this state has never been a privilege. It's always been a right. But it has been a right of the privileged. So therefore, that is where they get the confusion. The privileged have always had a right to vote. First, it was property. If you were property, if you were a property person, you had the right to vote. So if you were the privileged few in the upper echelon, you had the right to vote. Right? Then, in a patriarchal society in 1844, only white men had the right to vote. The 15th Amendment did away with the white men and said only men had the right to vote. So again, a patriarchal society, who's the privileged people? The white. Well, I mean, the men. In pre-Civil War, it was the whites, and still today somewhat. But anyway, so only the privileged have a right to vote, right? Now we come into 1944, they say, okay, only whites can vote, and this crime and this crime and this crime are not allowed to vote. And that is what brings us to the disenfranchisement by felony, or felony disenfranchisement. Now, that was challenged in 1970 by a person that robbed a bicycle. And the courts looked over the records and found out that the law was very arbitrary, and they said it was unconstitutional. So rather than removing it, the legislature decided we'll just blanket it. And now everybody with a felony conviction does not have the right to vote in this state. Now, you say, well, you know, it's going to ruin society. Well, Maine and Vermont have never disenfranchised anyone with felony conviction. Their society is running fine. But demographically, they are the two whitest states in the nation. So, again, we're talking privilege. We are always putting us, them. So we always us, the privilege, and them, everybody else. So today I want to talk to you more about this disenfranchisement of people in prison or parole and probation. Now, I myself have done 30 years in prison. I am currently home on probation. I do not have a right to vote, but I pay my taxes. I am serving my public. I am allowed to talk to governors and senators and assemblymen to try to convince them to make laws. But I'm not allowed to implement my vote to make any laws. When I was incarcerated, I became involved in the New Jersey STEP program, which is a college program that is matriculates toward degrees. And while I was in that, I had a political science class. Now, in that political science class, we studied the history of the political history of disenfranchisement of the black individual. And that was all the way from the enslavement of African people, right, to the Civil War, to where black men were starting to get into office, and then we had, of course, Jim Crow. And if we follow the facts, right, we have 102,000 people in New Jersey today that are disenfranchised, more than that, right? Of that, 43% are African American. even though they make up 15% of the New Jersey population. Now, some people say, well, how about, okay, you're paying taxes or at parole and probation. Yes, that will lower the numbers down by a significant number. However, it will raise the disparity up. For one, it will make 62% the average of ratio between black disenfranchisement and white. Black disenfranchisement being 62%, even though they still only make up 15% of the population. Now, the other problem with that is class, and it's part of the black to white, but it also is class, because if you have people in prison can't vote, people on probation can't. Think about that. Think about that for 1 second. Now, I have lots of money. No, I don't, but for this argument's sake, I have lots of money, and I commit this offense, right? My friend, who is an African-American man, right, he has no money, right? So I get the best of attorneys. You know, I go to the best law firm I can, and I make sure that even though I can't get out of the crime, I'm only going to do probation. Maybe an extended period of probation, but probation nevertheless. My friend, because he's using a public defender's office, and there's nothing wrong, public defenders are great. They are hard-working people, but they also are overworked. So they managed to get him 3 years incarcerated, right? Now, for the same exact crime, right? One's not disenfranchised and one is. For the same exact crime. So how can you say that there's a principled way to separate those two? There is not. And so I urge you to tell your governor, tell your legislators, tell your senators and assemblymen that you want to support S2100 and A3456, which is the bills in the houses right now that will separate the criminal justice system from the electoral process. And that's got to be separated because, as I've just explained, there's a lot of racial disparity in the criminal justice system, which you now incorporate into your electorate. So you must separate this, otherwise you will have a system that is not legit. You cannot justify what's being done. You cannot justify having this incorporated. It doesn't serve a useful purpose. It doesn't serve rehabilitation. It doesn't serve determined, because nobody's going to say, I'll get 10 years, but I can deal with that. But I better not commit this crime because I might lose my right to vote. Even though most people, because it's a collateral consequence, don't even know they're losing. So we have to get these laws out of the way. We have to lead this country toward more inclusive democracy and allow our citizenry to vote, every last one of us. Now, I also want to take 1 minute to discuss it. When you can vote, right, you're more connected to your society. 93%, I think, is the number, coming back home, and it's probably higher than that. But 93% are coming back home, disconnected from their society, unable to reconnect with society, stuck in a limbo, in a marginalized world. That's the reality of what today is. We need to adjust that. We need to get it out. And I implore you to reach out to your congressmen, your assemblymen, your senators, your governor. Oh, that's what I was trying to get in my head. I couldn't. That's what was going on. I was thinking. And you can do this by tweeting.
You just put in letUsVoteNJ.org?
Yes. I don't know if you had to tweet it or not. I'm only home a few years. I'm not very technically savvy, but I'm working on it. And I implore you, please push this legislation through. It it will create a better society, not a worse society. If you exclude, you more or less divide. If you include, you join. That's what inclusive means. That's what exclusive means. Thank you for your time.
Hi, good evening. I'd like to also thank Renee and Appleseed for putting together this wonderful program. So, how have criminologists viewed crime, and how did they feel were the best ways to respond to those who committed crimes? There have been shifts in thought about what makes law violators tick, and each era of thought led to a set of presumptions about how the incarcerated should be treated. All these ideas have been around for a very long time, but particular mindsets have dominated the thinking at particular points in history. I'll briefly outline the history of the eras of 20th century American criminology. This outline is based on the scholarship of Professor Todd Clear, who is also instrumental in the NJSTEC program that we already heard about. Before beginning to describe the eras, I should make two introductory comments, one sociological and the other historical. It should be noted that the particular philosophy of crime and criminality that is accepted in a given point in history relates directly to the general ethos of that particular period, of what makes sense to people living in that time. It should also be noted that since antiquity until about 200 years ago, punishment for crime was done by harming the body of the offender. Think of Hammurabi's Code and the Bible's stern injunction of an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. As the French philosopher Michel Foucault points out, that it's only in the last 200 years that the target of punishment has shifted from the body to the mind of the offender. This change is not necessarily an advance, but a strategic shift in the politics of punishment. Critics have argued that the prison systems are in fact more intrusive and coercive than the physical punishment. The offender loses autonomy and his well-being suffers. Okay. Now I will lay out the four key eras in criminological thinking in 20th century America. The Reform era from 1900 to 1950 was a time in which people who broke the law were viewed as bad and in need of being, quote, corrected. People on parole were viewed as needing to be held strictly and made to work, prohibited from associating with, quote, bad influences, barred from places of vice, and watched closely to make sure they complied with the rules of supervision. It was thought that they should live productive lives, not mooch or connive off of the society. The Reform era could actually be thought of as beginning in 1870, after the Cincinnati Prison Conference that reified the idea of the correcting of the offender, and so a lot of the language associated with Reform ideology. It was also an era of religious revival in America, and the idea of sinner reformed was a dominant social theme. It was during this period that reform schools got their start. The Rehabilitation era, from 1950 to 1970, saw a shift. People who break the law were now seen as sick, not necessarily mentally ill, but socially maladjusted. It was thought that such people needed to be changed. They needed interpersonal relationships with people who showed them how to live their lives differently. They may need some form of treatment. They certainly needed services that could fix what ails them, which was thought of as poor emotional maturity, limited applicable skills and abilities, and a lack of work ethic. It was during this period that the theories of the psychoanalyst Sigmund Freud and psychotherapy became popular, and the idea of the, quote, sick mind came to dominate social thinking. At the same time, big institutions were being built, prisons, mental institutions, hospitals, and the like. Badness was seen as kind of beyond a person's control, but subject to professional intervention. It was an era, the apex of professional medicine. Doctors were thought of as people who could fix you. All these intellectual and cultural influences contributed to the dominance of the rehabilitation era in criminology. The 1970s saw a significant shift which gave rise to the reintegration era. It was believed that society had failed the people who broke the law. What these people needed was a chance to become a part of society, to be valued and accepted as fellow citizens with rights and dignity. It was thought that communities should be reconfigured in ways that make it easier for people who had broken the law to become contributing members of their communities. It was believed that people would take responsibility for their lives if they were provided with the necessary tools to do so. The civil rights movement, the anti-war movement, and the like brought about distrust of authority figures, including professionals and doctors, and the state. Prisons were seen as failed institutions of state power. Communities were seen as the locus of energy and authority. The Attica prison rebellion was a paradigmatic example of the failure of institutions. Reintegration held that people belonged in communities, and if their needs were met, even those who were formerly incarcerated could stay in the community safely. The period of the 1980s to 2000 or so was the period of restraint, which saw a very, very drastic turn. People who broke the law were now seen as fundamentally bad, and there was not much that could be done about it. Some would change on their own, but most would not. What was required was that these people be watched closely, and it was necessary that the criminal justice system quickly yank them back into confinement if they showed signs of recidivism. It was necessary to protect society from these people. It was felt that really nothing worked. Around this time, the work of Robert Martinson and a host of other nothing work studies cast doubt on all intervention-based programs. At the same time, the political backlash to crime in the streets and the call for law and order gave birth to a Get Tough movement that was about punishment and not redemption. The core idea of restraint was that people did not easily change, certainly not as a result of intentional interventions. And so, who could blame the system for focusing on restraining people and not changing them? As you can see, these are all elements of all of these areas are still with us today, but we seem to be returning to a mindset of reintegration. One expression of this mindset is the renewed focus and push for educational programs in the prison system and in the jails. Education in the prisons is both an expression of the rehabilitation model's focus on improving the individual, and to the extent that such programs seek to assist the incarcerated with the transition out of prison, they're also an expression of the reintegration model. The New Jersey Scholarship and Transformative Education in Prisons program, MJ STEP, located in the School of Criminal Justice at Rutgers University, Newark, which I taught with for 2 years, is an example of the current efforts to bring educational opportunities to those who are incarcerated. My experience teaching in prison brought home to me how those who are incarcerated are profoundly thirsty for knowledge and are deeply committed to education and self-improvement. To recap, the 4 eras of American criminological thinking in the 20th century include the era of reform, rehabilitation, reintegration, and restraint. The recent shift away from restraint and towards reintegration is a hopeful development. Obviously, there is still a great deal about the criminal justice system and the prison system that needs to be changed so that once people leave the prison, they can truly be reintegrated into our society and be treated as fellow citizens with full rights and dignity. It should come as no surprise that those who are incarcerated are aware of the shifts in the attitudes towards crime and punishment and have strong feelings about the subject. My experience teaching in prison has impressed upon me the thoughtfulness of my subjects and the need, my students, and the need to include their voices in the discussion of prison reform. One experience of mine while teaching an Introduction to Sociology course in the prison in Bordentown speaks to this point. My class was discussing the reading from the 1970s about the famous Stanford prison experiment, which basically found that when a group of students were randomly assigned the roles of guards and inmates, the students who were playing the role of guards became so brutal, and the students who were playing the role of inmates became so dehumanized that the 2-week experiment was cut short after less than a week. One of my students asked incredulously, "Do people know about this research? How could they send us away to prison for years when those students couldn't survive a week?" I'm also reminded of another class discussion in prison. This occurred shortly after Judge Aaron Persky of the Santa Clara Superior Court handed down a light sentence of 6 months to Brock Turner, a swimmer athlete at Stanford University, who was convicted of 3 counts of felony sexual assault for assaulting an intoxicated and unconscious 22-year-old woman. The judge explained his actions by stating that a longer sentence would have, quote, severe impact on Brock Turner and, quote, an adverse collateral consequence on him. My students demanded, "You think prison doesn't have adverse consequences for us?" There is also a great need for additional support and creative thinking regarding reintegration for people once they've left the prison system. My wife, who is a professor at St. Francis College in Brooklyn, has been involved with several students in her college who were recently released from prison. One man had been away for 17 years, and upon release had all of $3.75 to his name. He was completely flummoxed by the MetroCard system. When he went to prison, New York still used subway tokens. In addition, he was totally overwhelmed by this new invention called email and all the logistics of logging into electronic systems. The current criminal justice system systematically disadvantages people of color and the poor and doesn't do nearly enough to prepare them to reintegrate into mainstream society as productive citizens. Those who are locked up eventually return, the majority of people who are locked up eventually return to mainstream society, and they're usually even less prepared to become productive members of that society than they were when they were sent away. We must do better for them, for their families and communities, and for the sake of our entire society. Thank you.
So I'm going to take the privilege of going last, and what that allows me to do is to reflect a little bit on what some other folks said. I'll just try and tie a couple quick things in and then get to what I was planning to talk about. So the last point, when we were saying that the 1980 to 2000 is defined as the age of restraint, I thought, restraint? We locked more people up in that time period than we had in the course of human history, essentially. So then I realized what you meant by restraint. But I think it's important in this context when we're talking about prisons to understand that in 1970, there were somewhere in the 200,000s of people locked up in this country. And today there's 2.3 million people locked up in this country. So that is not a normal increase. That is an exponentially large increase. And so we can't talk about prisons and prison reform if we're not talking about the crisis that is mass incarceration in our country. And, Andrea, we're hearing about prison reform, and Renee's talking about prison reform and all these changes, and then they started locking people in cells on their own. And it reminded me, relevant to what Andrea's talking about, that the word reform doesn't mean things are getting better, right? And so don't, and this is totally consistent with what Andrea's been saying, but don't hear, well, we're going to reform our juvenile justice system and say, oh, great. Hear what it is and make sure it involves locking fewer people up and treating them differently and giving them a possibility of success rather than just saying we're going to change from one set of prisons to a different set of prisons. And I'm thinking about this also because of my relationship with Ron, and when I first got to know Ron was in the work that we did together to end solitary confinement in New Jersey. And we're not done, but we've crossed the major hurdle when the governor a couple months ago signed the Isolated Confinement Restriction Act. And so thinking about these initial kind of reform prisons, which had people being thinking about what they had done wrong, so isolating them, and now we have the benefit of knowing what damage that wreaks on people's psyche and on their lives. And it's just amazing to me. I've seen Ron testify before legislative bodies, and I've seen him literally sway state legislators, have them change their vote because of how because he moves them, because he spoke to them, and it's unbelievable to me that he can't then go vote for them or vote against them if he doesn't. Right? That is a fundamental flaw in democracy. That is in fact something that makes us question whether or not the system we're operating in is a democracy. So kudos to what everyone else said. I want to just tell you a story about my favorite client. I like all my clients, but one of the clients he's been my longest term client. And then I want to kind of draw 3 lessons from that story. So I'm going to tell you about James Comer, who I've been representing now for about 6 years. In about 2000, when James was 17, he had grown up in Newark, and he had lived in Newark his whole life. Went to Newark public schools and was going to school. He was still in school at the time. He and a friend who was also 17, and a cousin who was 22 or something like that, went on a robbery spree. It was terrible and dangerous, and they were armed with guns. And they robbed 4 people that night. And in the course of one of the robberies, the other 17-year-old, not James, but his co-defendant, shot and killed one of the robbery victims. And they were caught, and they were tried. They were waived up to adult court, which meant they were going to treat James and his 17-year-old co-defendant as if they were adults. They were out of the juvenile justice system that Andrea had been talking about, and they were prosecuted in the adult criminal justice system right up the hill here at 50 Market Street. And they offered, at the time, the prosecutor offered James and his co-defendant a deal where if they pled guilty, they could get a sentence of 20 years in prison. And of that 20 years, they would have to do 17 years. James was 17 at the time, so his entire life ahead of him would have been in prison. As much as he had spent so far on this earth, he would spend that time in prison. And he did what 17-year-olds, and you guys all have met 17-year-olds before, right? He did what 17-year-olds are prone to do, which is he made a bad decision. And he said, no, let's go to trial. And I say this is a bad decision with the benefit of hindsight and knowing the proofs that the state had, and among the proofs that the state had was they convinced the adult co-defendant to testify against the 2 juveniles. So they gave the lowest sentence to the only adult, had him testify against the juveniles, and they were convicted at trial. James had never been convicted of a crime, he had no juvenile adjudications, but at trial he was convicted of 3 counts of robbery, 4 counts of robbery actually, and 1 count of what's called felony murder. So even though James didn't pull the trigger, wasn't alleged to have pulled the trigger, he was treated as just as culpable of the murder as his co-defendant. And he was convicted of all of those things. And the judge sentenced him to what was then, and is now, the mandatory minimum sentence for murder, which is 30 years, of which you must do 30 years. And then the judge had a choice. What was he going to do with these robbery sentences? And the judge said, well, I don't really find anything particularly aggravating or mitigating in your circumstances, so I'm going to give you the middle range sentence, 15 years for the robbery. But then the judge had another choice, which is to run the sentences concurrently with one another, where you serve them all at one time, or do you run them consecutive to one another, where you do the 30, and then you do the 15, and then the 15. And he chose to do that. He ran the sentences consecutively. So at 17 years old, James Colbert was sentenced to 75 years in prison, of which he had to do 68 3/4 without parole. And I see a lot of you doing the math, right? And so effectively, what that meant was James was sentenced to die in prison as a 17-year-old. So, in addition to this new brain science we have about solitary confinement and the horrible effects it has on people, we also now have brain science that tells us lots of things about kids. And among the things it tells us about kids is that their brains are not fully developed. They're not fully developed till long after their adolescence, probably till around 25 or 26. And it shows that kids, because their brains aren't fully developed, they're more susceptible to peer pressure, and they're more likely to do impulsive things, but they're also more capable of reform, more capable of change because of the not fully developed brains. And so some savvy lawyers around the country first brought a challenge to the question of whether or not the state is authorized to kill children who commit terrible crimes, whether capital punishment of children is authorized. And in the 1980s, the U.S. Supreme Court said, sure, but not really young children, but if they're 16 or 17, that would be fine. And so armed with this new information, these lawyers went to the Supreme Court and said, we should never be killing children because the death penalty should be reserved for the most culpable among us. And given what we know about brain science, children can never be the most culpable among us. And the Supreme Court bought it. So the Supreme Court said we can no longer kill children. So the same lawyer said, hold on. If this brain science means something, shouldn't it also mean something if we're sentencing children to die in prison for crimes they committed as juveniles? So their first challenge was a case called Graham versus Florida. They said, how about just looking at kids who were sentenced to die in prison for crimes where no one else was killed, where no one was killed, so for non-homicide offenses. And the Supreme Court bought it too, and they said, okay, children can't get life in prison without the possibility of parole for non-homicide offenses. They went back to the court in a case called Miller versus Alabama, and they said, we should never have mandatory sentences of life without parole for children, even who commit homicide offenses. And the court agreed. So that brings us now to New Jersey in 2011 or 2012, where we decided, so in New Jersey there were actually no kids who were serving sentences that were called life without parole. But we knew there were kids who had been sentenced to die in prison, like James Colbert. So we looked and we looked and we looked and we decided James's was the best case, and we wanted to challenge what we call de facto life without parole. Because if you said to someone, okay, I'm not going to give you life without parole, but I'm going to give you 1,000 years in prison, everyone understands what that means. And obviously, as you work down from 1,000, there's still these really high numbers that have the same net effect. The child has no hope, no chance of getting out. And so we brought a challenge to James's sentence. We argued that it was an unconstitutional sentence because the judge had not fairly considered the mitigating aspects of his youth, the things about being a kid that made him less culpable. The judge actually agreed with us. He said, I think you're right, I didn't consider that, I'm going to resentence him. In the state appeal, we wound up at the New Jersey Supreme Court. And the New Jersey Supreme Court decided that James was entitled to a resentencing. And so along with the lawyers at Gibbons PC, we went and we had a resentencing for James. And it was a pretty remarkable event. We hired this really eminent psychiatrist who had been in all these high-profile cases, this guy named Richard Dudley. And Dr. Dudley went and did a life history of James, and he met with him at the state prison 2 different times, talked to him, talked to family members, and he provided the court with a 17-page report. And Dr. Dudley said, based on what I've seen, he is not a threat to society. He is no threat to society today. If released today, he would be no greater threat than anybody else. And then we got former Governor Jim McGreevey to do a re-entry plan for James. So he met with James, he talked to him, he found out about his interests, he did an aptitude test to figure out what his strengths and weaknesses were, and he figured out a plan for James. He was going to get him stable housing, he was going to get him a job, a union job with an apprenticeship, where he was going to become a union carpenter because he had some math skills and he was talented with his hands, and he had a whole plan. He said, give me 6 months, And I'll get this plan in place, and I'll have housing, and I'll have counseling, and I'll have a mentor. And we went to the judge, and we presented all of this stuff, and the judge said, look, I agree. I buy everything you say. I accept Dr. Dudley's conclusion, and I'm going to reduce the sentence. And it was this remarkable moment. I said to the, I'd really grown to know James. And I said to the judge and I live in the same town, and we happen to see each other at things I'm doing with my kids. From time to time, he sees me in restaurants. He knows that I have a close relationship with my kids. I care a lot about it. I said, I'm not exaggerating, Judge, when I say if James got out and he needed some extra work, he'd be babysitting for my kids. I thought that would kind of reach the judge, and I meant it. I meant it from the deepest part of my heart, and that's how much I thought this person was worth one person. The judge said, great. But here's the deal. I'm going to reduce the sentence. I think I'm constrained to sentence him to 30 years. I think I cannot go lower than that. And so on the one hand, man, that's terrific. I've just given James hope. He goes from someone who will have no hope of ever being released to someone who knows that he will be released in 12 years. And on the other hand, and this is the bigger hand, you've just accepted the findings. The psychiatrist that this person is no threat, that this person is changed. The Essex County Prosecutor's Office at the time was willing to sentence him, to have him do 17 years. He's done 18. But because there's a statute out there, he's going to sit in jail. We're working on it, but unless we made our appeal, which is currently pending, he will sit in jail for 12 years for no reason. There's no deterrence value. There's no incapacitation value. He's no risk. There's no rehabilitative value. The psychiatrist says he's rehabilitated. So why are we doing it? Because there's a statute that says it. So as I said, we're appealing that. We'll argue it in the next couple of months. But let me tell you the 3 lessons that I think kind of speak to broader issues of reform. Lesson 1 is we need to find ways to treat kids like kids. The nonsensical idea of do an adult crime, do the adult time is outdated. It's kind of debunked by the science, and its origins are deeply racist. But kids are kids. Kids are kids when they do cute stuff. Kids are kids when they do horrible stuff. And so that doesn't mean there shouldn't be consequences for kids, but the idea that we treat kids like adults is a legal fiction that has no place. That's point 1. Point 2 is we've just got this really messed up. I guess point 2 is mandatory minimums are crazy. Anytime you tell a judge you must do this, we're going to strip you of your discretion to think about things, that's crazy. We're paying judges $175,000 a year to make decisions about what is just, what is right. Why are we depriving them of the ability to figure out what is just and what is right? The other thing is, we're just scaled up. And this is part of that kind of mass incarceration crisis. Our sense of what a just sentence is so bananas. So just the idea that the appropriate sentence for anyone, for anything, 75 years in prison reflects a profound misunderstanding of what it means to be in prison. And so we can talk all we want about reforming prisons and making them kinder and gentler places, but prisons are inherently violent places, and I don't just mean that in the prison movie sense of violence. I mean, you're stripping people from their family, the freedom to make free choice. That is violence. And subjecting someone to decades and decades of that has profound effects both on that person's life and on their family and on our communities. And we need to do better as a society. We need to transform ourselves from this punitive model where we think, well, if 10 years wasn't enough to stop people from doing this, then we must go to 15 or 20 rather than fundamentally reimagining the way we're dealing with crime and social problems of all sorts. And at the end of the day, I just think James deserves better. We deserve better because if the status quo holds, we don't get James as a babysitter, as a son, as a friend for 12 years, and that's all of our loss.
So I'd like to open it up for questions, and if you could just direct your question to an individual panelist or to the panelists of the vote, that would be fine.
This is directed to Mr. Pierce, and my perspective may seem trivial, but to me it isn't. A person with a felony conviction can't serve on a jury. I received my notification that I can't serve on a jury because when I was 68 years old, I pushed a man who was banging on my car and wound up with an aggravated assault felony conviction. Yeah. Now, to me, that's an insult because I believe I should be just as fair as anybody else. I believe I could be just as fair as anybody else. Even though I didn't serve time in prison, but I went on to probation and went through the system. It's an awful experience. And so it may sound trivial, but if you're trying to secure voting rights, maybe you could add a few things into that package. In other words, to reconsider whether felony convictions automatically should preclude serving on a jury. Maybe in some cases they should. You know, we have to be fair and realistic. But not in all cases. And it's an insult. And it's also a sign, it seems to me, from the state that says, hey, we say we want to reintegrate you into society, but we don't really mean it. We're just going through the motions. So maybe you consider having convicted felons get their right to serve on a jury. And the other thing is really pie in the sky. It's unrealistic. But it's along the same lines. According to the flyer, you are a former Marine, and you're not going to cause trouble for anybody. It seems to me now, even though we're dealing with federal legislation now, but it seems to me that under certain circumstances, you and I should have the right to own a firearm to protect ourselves. If somebody breaks into my house, I have a wife, I'm 5 foot 4.5 inches, it's not a good start. So that's another thing. If the society is serious about integrating convicted felons back into the fold, then there shouldn't be any automatic exclusions. They should be, ideally anyway, on a case-by-case basis. And I would just like your response to that.
That's part of the 141 collateral consequences I was talking about earlier. I agree with you that if you're going to integrate somebody into society, the inclusiveness of society means they are completely full parts of society. I got a jury notice today in the mail. I have to go and apply for it and get turned down. Right now, my fight is with the voting rights because I believe the voting rights helps us to get a voice to demand to sit on the jury. I believe that wholeheartedly. I believe all 41, including housing discrimination, including work discrimination, including educational discrimination, all of that will be benefited by being able to get the vote. So I'm not done with getting everything. I just am starting with the vote. And then I will go from there wherever I can get to do the next job. But yes, I believe the same as you, that if we are citizens, and we are, no conviction removed our citizenship, right? Then we should have the right of a citizen. And yes, it can be discussed and it can be argued that certain rights can be restricted or temporarily restricted by probation as a safety measure, right? But voting is not a safety measure. Jury duty is not a safety measure. Matter of fact, I would sit on a jury, and I bet you half of the people in this audience would prefer they didn't get one of these.
If I could just add one quick thing on the jury service piece, because it's something Ron and Andrea and I have been talking about for a while, which is there's this interesting anomaly. So New Jersey excludes people with felony convictions from all jury service, criminal and civil, right? So what that society is saying is that Ron is not fit to decide who is responsible for a car accident or a medical malpractice, right? So it's criminal and civil. But there was a brief blip in time where that wasn't true, and that was in the 1990s. And it was actually a legislative mistake. They were fixing one thing with jury service, and they accidentally took out the prohibition on serving on juries. So for a year and a half or 2 years, people of felony conviction served on juries. And then they changed it, and we have a very sparse legislative history. But there was a state senator from Bergen County who reported that his constituents just really didn't like serving on juries with those people. And I'll leave it to you to figure out what that means. But I think it reinforces my belief that the exclusion of people with felony convictions from jury service and from voting is deeply racist in its origins.
Andrea, I'd like to ask, you have these pending legislation to reform, and you said the governor is enacting. I'm not going to get on the geopolitical nature. I mean, at the top, it actually seems like we just need to change leadership. But if we have something that needs to get done, what are they saying that are holding up these hearings? And what are they depending the reasons why these bills are not actually passed right now?
So there are those two separate processes that I mentioned, kind of two inside games. With our 150 Years is Enough campaign, we have an inside game and we have an outside game. The outside game often has put pressure on the inside game in the state to act. For example, when the January 8, 2018 closure announcement happened, the governor's transition team on law and public safety advocated for the creation of a task force to oversee the closure process. A year passed, the task force hadn't been created, so the campaign created a rally called the Rally for the 94% that represented the 94% of Black voters that elected Governor Murphy. The evening before the rally was held, Governor Murphy signed Executive Order number 42 creating the task force. A week after the task force first meeting, the task force was notified that the state had plans to build a new youth prison here in Newark on the old Pat's Brewery site, about 5 minutes from the Newark Central Avenue site. In response, the campaign had a rally, the Lock Arms to Unlock Our Kids rally, and the evening before the rally, the state said that they were not making plans to build on that site any longer. And so our kind of outside game is a big piece of what is keeping pressure to move it forward, which is why I know that those buildupkidsnj.org and letusvotenj.org, where we're now calling on that outside game, all of you, all the advocates, faith leaders, formerly incarcerated people, etc., to put pressure on the legislature to move the youth justice transformation bill forward, and also to put pressure on Governor Murphy to call those task force hearings. And so I can't speak to what's going on with the task force right now, but I can say that outside pressure is needed now more than ever to make sure that the task force does what it needs to do in holding those public hearings to hear from the community and to push, as another tool in the toolkit, the New Jersey Youth Justice Transformation Act forward as well.
This question is for Andrea as well. I had an opportunity to sit in on the conversation when the Attorney General came to the Ivy Hill Association to give a talk about the Youth Rehabilitation Center. What's the difference between what the coalition is proposing in terms of what should be done and what the folks from the AG's office proposed in terms of the rehabilitation center and all of the bells and whistles, it was trauma-informed and all these different things?
That's a great question. So in our vision document, we lay all that out here. So something that's really important is that the conversation isn't just focused on facilities. Right now, the idea is that New Jersey will close two of its youth prisons and replace them with smaller youth prisons. There was a plan, as I mentioned, to build one in Newark. That was defeated, but there are still plans to build 2 48-bed facilities in Winslow and Ewing Township. Even though it's called, Ewing and Winslow Township, even though the site is called Winslow Township, it's actually in Atlantic County in Hamilton. Our position, national best practices, is that if there does need to be out-of-home placement, one, it should only be for public safety reasons. If the young person continues to pose a public safety risk, they should be out of home. But 30 beds or less, home-like and in the communities where the young people are coming from. I encourage anyone to go to the 2 sites that are being proposed in Winslow and Ewing. They're far away. You can't get there via public transportation. They're very large and really unnecessary, that kind of space, far away from families and kids. And so what we're proposing in Newark, for example, as I mentioned, there's a residential community home on Central Avenue. It's built for 25 young people. It's already in the community. Our position is that can be repurposed or renovated for those young people in the northern region that need to be out of home. And so instead of building a new facility on the PAP site, for example, and increasing the footprint of mass incarceration at a time when we're reducing numbers, let's first look to the empty beds we already have, renovating, repurposing those, but also importantly, investing just as much money into the community so that our kids never become system involved at all.
Hi, Andrea. This question is for you. Can you just talk about the strategy you guys use at the Institute to close or to derail the prison being built in Newark? I know I was out there watching with you guys, but this was like a general sense so that we all know some of the strategies that we use, which was a successful strategy, so we're just trying to maybe replicate some of those strategies across the state. Thank you.
Sure, Zalman. So what we did, as I mentioned, is this inside-outside game strategy, where we were at the table with the AG and the administration after the closure announcement to try and make sure community voices were viewed in the process. Once we realized that we were just having meetings after meetings, report outs were happening, and the state was moving forward with its plans to build these new facilities, that's when we activated our coalition, our 150 Years is Enough campaign coalition, and brought together formerly incarcerated young people and advocates, community members who were just down for the cause. And I encourage all of you to join our 150 Years is Enough campaign if you haven't already. That's when we mobilized people at Westside High School and marched over to the PAP site and locked arms around the site to say that there need to be no more youth prisons in Newark or beyond. And so right now, I won't get ahead of myself, but we may be rallying up to a point where we are going to activate the outside game again. We are already doing that with the vote to action piece as well, which is why we're really encouraging everyone to look at letusvotenj.org and buildupkidsnj.org, because it's imperative that we keep the community involved. We keep the community at the forefront through both the task forces, public hearings, and pushing through the legislation. So it really is a combination of the inside strategy and the outside strategy, engaging community members in the process as well.
Are there any more questions? If not, I want to thank everybody on the panel. Oh, Myles wants to ask a question.
Thank you all for presenting here today. I just wanted to ask one final question. Looking forward in the next 20 to 30 years, how do you think or even the next 10 years, how do you think the American prison system will evolve? What changes do you anticipate coming up next? And what do you think is in the future? Maybe just a minute or 30 seconds for each of you.
Reimagination is the word you used as opposed to rethinking. So imagine.
So there's, it's a complicated question of like, what do I think is going to happen versus what do I want to happen? I think the movement to end solitary confinement is gaining steam, and I think I both hope and think it will, catch on in other states. I hope we're not just looking at conditions of confinement. I hope we're also looking at questions of confinement. We do it too much, we do it for too long, and we need to stop it.
I mean, as mentioned, the ideal is that there are no more youth prisons. Do I think that's necessarily realistic within the next 20 to 30 years? I mean, that's a conversation to have. I do know that we need to set the reframe about what it means to have youth justice, what it means to remedy harm, have more conversations about restorative justice, transformative justice, rather than just youth incarceration. So I think reframing the idea of what justice is in the youth context is possible, and then moving beyond that, hopefully changing hearts and minds and transforming the system that way as well.
I have little hope for this prison system as it stands today. I hope it falls in the sea. Now, what do I think? I think in the next 10 to 20 years, if we keep the outside game up and do from the ground up and build coalitions to push the needle, I think we can have a system that is trauma-informed and helps the people get the assistance they need for the life traumas that kind of direct their lives. That's what I hope for, what I see, or that's what I hope to see. But unless we stick to the plan and keep pushing legislators are going to stay with the status quo because they live on the status quo. They move on the make me do it.
Personally, I'm not especially optimistic about major kind of structural changes to the criminal justice system, but at the same time, given just how horrendous the system is, I think we don't have a choice but to be optimistic and try to fight to have a more just system. So once we're in that kind of frame of mind, as a sociologist, I think about systems and how they operate, and I think that it's not possible to have true justice, a truly kind of healthy society without looking at the root causes of why people end up in the criminal justice system, both youth and adults, and until we look at issues of racism and class and poverty and joblessness and all sorts of structural problems in our society, it's not possible to get at the root causes of crime and why people get kind of sucked into the criminal justice system. So in order to really change the criminal justice system, we have to go back to these communities, we have to go back to just thinking as a country how to get at these root causes. But the slightly optimistic part of me feels that these days there's a lot of discussion about structural inequality and structural problems in the political system, so even kind of centrist Democratic politicians are feeling the pressure to speak about larger structural inequalities, so maybe we will actually, over the next several decades, start to grapple with these larger structural issues.
So I'd like to end and say what this exhibit and what this discussion has really showed us is that prisons really are reflective of our cultural and political values that we hold. So it's urging that even if people are not individually touched by the prison system, that you should feel a responsibility to be active and get involved in these initiatives to actually make sure that the prison system, whether it's a modified prison system or it disappears completely, reflects your values. And that's what should be motivating. And hopefully the outside game, as Andrea refers to it, and we're talking about now, is something much more focused. We're not talking about the whole United States, we're talking about specific initiatives, specific pieces of legislation in New Jersey. And it's relatively small, and it can be very direct. The more we can engage communities to put pressure on their representatives, that they really believe that this is what we, or the residents of New Jersey, truly believe and want our institutions to reflect. I do think there's a possibility for change, especially in the youth context. So with that, I'd like to thank everybody for coming, thank our panelists, and again, I want to thank, who I inadvertently got, Ann Anglet, from Director of Rutgers Express Newark, for really putting and helping us put the show together and allowing the exhibits to continue. So thank you.